Good afternoon. I'm Stephen Marcus Jones, and I'm the CEO of the Association for Consulting and Engineering, or sometimes known as ACE. I'm really excited to be moderating this conversation today. It's great to be talking about our campaign, Building Inclusivity, and this is the first of a series of roundtables that we're organising, focusing on Beyond Pride in this edition. Building Inclusivity, as I said, is a cross-industry ED&I campaign spearheaded by the ACE. We're bringing the industry together to help create more inclusive places for all. The first roundtable is shining a light on the LGBTQ plus communities, and we hope that today's conversation creates a safe space in which we can share our experiences, good practice, actions that we might want to take forward to our own workplaces, and really create a feeling of belonging, which I think is kind of core to all of this. We've got a fantastic panel joining us today: Angela Gildier of TIPSA, Wojciech Szewczak of Ramboll, and also the chair of ACE's Emerging Professionals, Sharon Slinger of Constructing Rainbows, Vicky Thorburn and Peter Weller from Building Equality, and my colleague Claire Clifford from ACE, our Director of People, Skills and Culture. As a panel then, we're going to explore what Beyond Pride means to us as business leaders and members of the LGBTQ plus community. Plus, we're going to approach two associated important themes. First, bringing your whole self to work. What does it mean? Practical ideas to encourage an inclusive culture. We'll then move on to sometimes the knotty and often confusing area of language and vocabulary. How do we get understanding out there? How do we get knowledge of the words that we use, instilled across our various work cultures? And I'd like to also share some tips and tools from the panel on how people can, take these ideas forward in their own workplaces. We've only got an hour, so we're going to move quite quickly onto that conversation. Please do ask questions as we go along. We'll try to get to all of the questions. If there's anything we can't address today, we'll obviously get back to you after the session. It's not just about today, this conversation. We're going to be recording it, and we're also going to be sharing it across ACE's YouTube channel and website, and it will also go into our email newsletter that will go out tomorrow, as well as any additional material that our panel may be able to share. So thank you very much, panel, for joining me today. As we go through our discussions, if I can ask you to introduce yourself for the first time, and if comfortable, please share your pronouns. So I'm going to start with Wojciech.
Hello, I'm Wojciech Szewczak. I use pronouns he, him, his. I'm a principal consultant at Ramboll and national chair for the Emerging Professionals group within the Association for Consultancy and Engineering.
Thank you, Wojciech. Angela.
I'm Angela Gildy from TIPSA. I'm happy to use pronouns she, her, hers. I'm the Internal Operations Manager for TIPSA in the United Kingdom.
Thank you. And Vicky?
Hi everyone, my name is Vicky Thorburn. I work for Buro Happold, where I'm the head of people data, and I'm also one of the national execs for Building Equality, which is an alliance that brings together all the LGBTQ networks across our industry. I'm happy with both she and they pronouns. I'm not precious about them, and I'm really pleased to meet you all.
Thank you, Vicky. Peter.
Hello there, everyone. My name's Peter Weller. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I'm a technical director with Mott MacDonald, and along with Vicky, I'm on the National Committee for Building Equality, as well as the North East Committee here in Newcastle. And looking forward to this roundtable.
Great, thanks, Peter. And Claire.
Hi, I'm Claire Clifford, work at ACE, look after everything to do with people, culture and skills. And my pronouns are she, her and hers.
Thank you, panel. And what I didn't say, what my pronouns are, they're he, him, his. Okay. So I'd like to kick off the discussion with the question, what does Beyond Pride actually mean to you? If I can just take the kind of the first view as the moderator, for me, Beyond Pride means walking the walk. Pride is more than a march. It's more than a time-bound event. it's more than a rainbow flag or logo. It's about true inclusivity. And I was thinking about this, can I get to a word that kind of enshrines my view on Beyond Pride? And I thought embeddedness was one that I kind of quite liked. So that's my view. I'm keen to hear from each of the panelists, what they think, what they understand by it. So if we come to Angela.
From my perspective, it's going beyond the day or the month, or as we've mentioned, the quarter of the celebration. So everyone can walk into the workplace and feel truly welcomed and truly open to engage with their colleagues, to celebrate their life choices, moments in their life where they don't feel that they can completely be open. And that's how I feel Beyond Pride is.
Thank you, Angela. Wojciech.
So when I was preparing for this roundtable, I was wondering how I could answer this quite a broad question, and then I've come up with an idea that I can actually answer this question from 3 different perspectives. Because as in life, you wear different hats in different situations. So from my personal perspective, as a member of the LGBTQ+ community, to me, Beyond Pride means being your authentic self and celebrating yourself as a whole person, not only in month June, but every day of the year. From the workplace perspective, as a people manager, Beyond Pride is about creating an inclusive environment that everyone feels equal, all voices are heard, and people feel free to be themselves, so they can bring their very best to work every day. Therefore, the role of people managers in the organization is so important, because they are responsible for creating the team's culture and contribute to the wider organizational culture. And from the industry perspective, as an emerging leader, you probably agree with me that we work in the industry which plays a unique role in shaping the society and building an environment around us, whether this is transport infrastructure or a sustainable building. This is why it is important that our industry is representative and inclusive. And the role of emerging leaders in the industry is to raise awareness and challenge the business as usual as necessary, because we want to work in the industry where the equality, diversity, and inclusion values are modeled and celebrated. And one last thing is that we all know that the staff retention and skills shortage in our industry are the most common challenges in the post-pandemic world. So we simply can't afford to miss out on the great talent of LGBTQ+ employees.
Thank you very much, Wojciech. On that kind of staff retention piece and attracting different communities to join our sector, do you think we're doing enough, Wojciech? What are your thoughts?
So I think that more needs to be done to make the construction industry more inclusive. I feel like there's still a lack of understanding of sexual orientation diversity, especially at the management level, which impacts the talent attraction and staff retention. So that's what I think.
Great, thank you. Okay, Sharon, should we come to you? What does Beyond Pride mean for you?
Yep, sure. I kind of missed my intro, so I'll just do an intro as well. I'm Sharon Slinger, she, her, and I'm Director of Constructing Rainbows, which is a diversity and inclusion consultancy focused on the built environment. So for me, as somebody who's bisexual, I don't just come out in June. You know, June is my birthday month and it is a big celebratory month for me. But, you know, I'm here all year round. And so actually, you know, I would expect organisations to be celebrating and supporting us all year round. I love rainbows. I've got rainbows everywhere, and I love the fact I can buy. Well, my wife doesn't love the fact that I can buy lots of rainbow stuff, but I love the fact I can buy lots of rainbow stuff in June. But what we really want to see behind that is what you're really doing to support your LGBT colleagues. Are you putting a rainbow logo up, which we just previously discussed can be quite a hard thing to do for some organisations to get it past the marketing departments? Or are you actually, saying, actually, we're not accepting discrimination against LGBT colleagues. If we hear homophobic language, we are going to call it out, and we are going to, discipline people in line with our anti-bullying policies. It has to be more than that kind of visual external look, and it has to be about that internal piece. So for me, Beyond Pride is very much about what are you doing all year round, and what are you doing to really make a difference.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sharon. Vicky.
I have to say there's been some really good answers already, so it's stolen all my best ideas.
Harder as it goes on.
I think one of the things to remember about Pride is that it is a celebration, but it is also a protest, and it's a reminder of the protests that LGBTQ people have had to make and are still making to be accepted, just for being themselves. And so I think if any company or any organization wants to celebrate Pride in June, also July, August and September now, they also have to be part of that protest, and they also have to do the work. And as Sharon just said, that could be, not accepting language, calling things out. It could be financially backing things. It could be, putting actions in place. I think we recently saw with Halifax saying, our staff are wearing pronouns on their name badges, and if you don't like it, you can leave. That's okay. And being ready to take that commercial hit, or being ready to make a stand. That's the difference between just putting a rainbow on your logo in June and actually starting to do the work. So that's to me, Beyond Pride means that you have to be doing the work as well.
Yeah. And how do you think that our sector's progressing in that regard?
Honestly, slowly, I think, is how we're progressing. I mean, I've been in the sector since 2006, and we've been having these conversations for that whole time. We are seeing changes. We're absolutely seeing people more able to be themselves and talk about being themselves. But we also know that there are pockets where that isn't changing very quickly. We know that there are still companies not ready to tackle that. And there is still a fear and a reticence around, how do we best support LGBTQ people? How can we celebrate Pride, but also make sure that the rest of the year we're still doing things as well? And that is going to take work. And I think that's where it becomes difficult, is that it is a constant piece of work that needs to be done all year round.
Thank you, Vicky. Peter.
As Vicky says, quite a few, lots of really good answers already. But I think the last few weeks and the last few days, in fact, in the political debate, just shows that although June is gone, we're hearing from the Conservative Party candidates for the leadership that they want to bring head back towards Section 28. They've been divisive. The transphobia is increasing across the spectrum. So we really need to stick up amongst our community, and it's LGBT. Make sure that we're being inclusive in our own community, and it's extending those values that we have and we show in June across the whole year, and think about how to raise a profile and really, as Vicky says, continue that protest. We're not done. People say, why do you need Pride anymore? It's quite clear, last few weeks, we do need Pride, and we're going to need Pride, sadly, for a long time as a protest. It's not over, and worldwide things are going backwards. So yeah, in that respect, the fight goes on.
Absolutely.
Can I just add to that? As it's getting nastier out in society, it becomes ever more important that companies are really supportive at work, because I've never felt so unsafe being open about myself, and I'm not part of the trans community, and it is awful, like the rhetoric that's going out there. And actually, that's why it becomes even more important for workspaces to be safe for people. And so, yeah, just to add to what Peter was saying there.
Thank you, Sharon. Claire, what are your views on Beyond Pride?
I mean, as an ally, I think for myself, it's about being quite conscious and visible in that space. So, you know, I'm not, I guess I have two hats. I have the professional hat, so the HR approach. So doing things that allow communities to participate freely. So that could be policy changes and making them gender neutral, for example. So in my professional work, but then I guess more on a personal side is that, you know, being authentic, which has been mentioned a couple of times on the call already, and calling those things out that maybe you hear or you feel uncomfortable with, and it's not directed to me, it's directed to people who I'm sitting alongside or working with. I think it's being brave enough to be visible and be open as an ally, that you aren't going to accept some of these things that you hear or see, not just in this month, but, you know, beyond. And I think that when you're not necessarily in the community all the time, it's really important to spend time with colleagues on the call here, looking and reading, to try and ensure how you can be an ally to people. And therefore, knowledge is power, and it can make you more powerful as an ally to sit next to your colleagues.
Okay, thank you, Claire. And this kind of the concept of calling people out, and what are the kind of cultural aspects that create an environment where people feel comfortable calling people out? Because, you know, I'm not sure we're there, but I'm interested to hear from panelists as to, you know, what creates that environment that you feel empowered.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I think I was going to say, Stephen, I think you're right, absolutely right to raise that question.
For me, it starts at the top. If you see leaders in meetings calling things out and not accepting kind of the offensive comments or whatever, then it creates that, you know, space where others feel that they're confident enough to do the same. If you're sat in a room and there's somebody that's got more power than you and they're not calling it out, then it becomes a lot harder for you as an individual to do so. But having said that, you know, if you have privilege in that room, as Claire says, you've got to be the one that's doing it. And you know, in the past, I'm sure we've all let comments slip, but now I think we're all trying a little bit harder to make it, you know, that safe space.
Yeah. Any other views from panelists on that?
I think it's Amy Edmondson's concept of psychological safety is really quite key here, and it's creating cultures where people feel safe to speak out, and whether that's about their sexuality, their partner, their home life, their background, or whether that's you know, feeling safe to challenge ideas or come up with new ideas or bring things that are a little bit off the wall, and that phrase of bringing your whole self to work, that's what it is. It's being free to be able to bring all of your ideas and to be as capable as possible. I do feel like, as Sharon just said, the more privilege you have, the more you are a leader, the more responsibility you have to be a role model and to call things out and know when to call things in. It's not always about publicly challenging or berating people. Sometimes it's a side comment just to say, look, you used a phrase there that isn't ideal, and I'm not going to embarrass you, but here's why that's not great. Here's what you should do next time. And there is a balance of knowing when to have a private conversation or whether to be publicly calling things out, but also it's being publicly a role model for those behaviors, demonstrating just in your language and the things that you do, moving over from emails that go out, and in our industry, hi gents is just absolutely typical on emails, even if your email is to all women. Moving over to hi all, hi everybody, hi team. You know, it's some really easy small changes that make everybody feel included instead of just 97% of people feel included.
And that let's go on to the concept of bringing your whole self to work. I mean, you know, my personal experience sometimes would be, you know, in certain environments, if somebody said, oh, what did you do for the weekend? You kind of give an edited version because you feel just you don't want to create any shock or change the tone of the conversation. And I think as I've got older, I've got better and more confident. But yeah, that concept of bringing your whole self to work is really important, I think, for somebody to thrive and flourish and to feel this belonging, which is kind of, you know, where we started in the intro. But keen to get panelists' views. Wojciech, what does bringing your whole self to work every day mean to you?
So to me, it means that I feel comfortable to raise my ideas within the team I'm working. So for me, it's just about like creating this culture, and couple of points from my personal story when I finally started feeling comfortable with myself and started sharing this with everyone within my organization. I realized that my performance at work went from meeting requirements or meeting expectations to significantly exceeding expectations, and it's just like my career accelerated because I can finally feel comfortable in the environment where I work. So I think that's the reason why I promote inclusive cultures, and I use that even when I lead a team and I want this team to be high performing. So for me, it's very important that every time when I'm in this position, I create this inclusive culture that everyone feels comfortable and feels safe.
Mm-hmm. And is there any specific intervention that you think that companies could make in order to contribute to that culture that you described?
Absolutely. I think it's all about the educational element, and I think that everyone should take a moment to learn about the LGBTQ plus community and about our challenges we are facing at the moment. And I wanted to add this comment before to what Vicky said, that, you know, yes, we need allies, we need role models to challenge behaviors or call out behaviors, but not everyone is feeling comfortable to do that, because we don't have many role models or many allies. So that's the reason why we need them more in the workplace.
Thank you, Wojciech. Any other, Angela, what's your sense of bringing your whole self to work?
I think those great comments have been made there, and I think, sorry about the phone going in the background, with regards to people actually coming to work and demonstrating an acceleration in their performance, because that they are more confident, and I think it's very important that people can go into the workplace, and also not just individuals are allies to the community. The actual employer is, and that's the employer leading by example, thinking about shared networks. So if for example, if a company is large enough to have its own particular networks, or also to tap into the industry, so like working with ACE, and to put in things in place and to acknowledge the best practice and practical tips where we could support our employees. Some may be more forthcoming, some may not. It's really to ensure that we continue, as has been mentioned, we're quite slow in our industry, and it's really giving people the tools and the almost the reassurance they can talk about their home lives. You know, I think with COVID now, we're so used to cats walking past, telephones playing in the background, children screaming, elderly parents who might be having challenges coming in onto the calls. But the one thing that really still hasn't kind of come forward from this is people's actual home lives with regards to their sexuality. And I think we really need to kind of push forward from this, rather than the natural progression that COVID has brought into workplace and home lives, kind of intertwining to actually support people, and talk about things more. You know, we've talked about beyond Pride, but this year actually volunteered at Pride this year, and it was was a really an eye-opening experience, because the diversity and the visibility there at that event really allows you to understand how vast, how many nationalities this actually is applicable to. And I think it's really important that everyone that works for our companies and our industry is supported to go into the workplace and be comfortable in their own skin, so to speak.
Thank you. I mean, the small talk is often kind of one of the ways that, you know, cultures can be very inclusive, but also can be very exclusive. You know, I've often been in situations where, you know, and this isn't anything to do with sexuality, I don't think, but there's a conversation about the football over the weekend, and you immediately feel, okay, I don't know how to participate in this conversation. Perhaps it's me and my lack of interest in football, but how do we get people thinking about small talk in a different way without it feeling too over-engineered so people feel inhibited to say anything? Keen to get Vicky, any views on that?
You had to pick on me for this one. I think there's a couple of things here. Small talk is you know, fine, as you say, it can be inclusive, and it can sometimes be a little exclusive. I don't think there's any problem with people talking about things they're passionate about, but to ensure that no single topic dominates. So, you know, it's great to have a conversation about the football if that's what you're into, and you know, women's team doing particularly well at the moment, just saying. Is it always the same football teams you talk about? But it's not having just, you know, our culture is we only talk about football and that's the only conversation that comes up. And when other people bring up a different conversation, there's a bit of tumbleweed because, you know, no one's really interested. It's actually just spending a bit of time and listening to people and saying, oh, you know, what are your hobbies? What are you interested in? What did you do at the weekend? You know, you might not be interested in computer games or, you know, amateur dramatics, but you listen to your colleague, you engage, you ask a question, and they feel that you're listening. And that's the basis of any teamwork and any conversation, really. I think that does bring us on to the topic of banter, which normally is a word used to describe some pretty exclusive conversations usually, you know, and where does banter start to cross a line? Where does it stop being a joke and where does it start punching down? And that's where I think that we need to be alert and aware and to call out some of those jokes that may step over a line. So to answer your question, I don't think there's any problem with small talk on any topic as long as it's, you know, polite and interactive with everyone. But banter's where we need to start asking questions. My favorite one is, I'm sorry, I didn't understand that joke. Could you explain it to me? You know, and if someone has told a joke that they know crosses a line or that they're uncomfortable explaining, they start to understand why they shouldn't be saying it in the workplace, and maybe save it for the pub, or never is my preference. So yeah, bring up any topic you like, but I think share everyone else's would be my takeaway.
Thank you, Vicky. Claire, have you got any thoughts on ingredients that make for a kind of workplace environment where people feel comfortable bringing their whole self?
Yeah, I mean, on that piece around the small talk side, that asking the question is key. So when you start a team meeting virtually, there's always, oh, it's hot today, isn't it? And you're like, we know we're just going to say yes or no, and if you're up north and if you're down south, that is like this blueprint that we have now on virtual meetings. But actually asking a question, what subjects should we talk about in our team meeting tomorrow to kick it off? And someone might say colours, and you talk about, you know, a rainbow or your flowers or your, so just take it up a level. Don't, you know, you might say, let's talk about sport. It might have women's football, or I believe cricket is on or just finished, tennis is on, just finished. So there's a lot of things. And so rather than talking about the specifics, try as a manager to take it up one level, and you'd be surprised as to what might come out in terms of the topics. So that's one thing that I think is easy to try, and you can write it down and you can be prepared. So as a manager, you've got your safety net that you're not going to entrap yourself into something you shouldn't say. And then I think, you know, a bit wider in terms of the culture piece, which I've done a little tally. I think we've mentioned it 11 times and we've only been talking for 20-30 minutes. We've mentioned the word culture. So it is obviously so integral to not just the community we're talking about now, but all communities, it's integral that we get that culture right. And I think there's not one way for every organization, because every organization is delivering something different and will be made up of different people. But everybody does need to think about it and make a conscious decision about their culture and how they'll be inclusive. And I think some of the things that we've heard here today are zero cost, low effort. They're just making a conscious decision to make a change. Think about your colleagues first. And I think, back to that piece around, you were saying, Stephen, about football. People always say to me, oh, hang on a second, we're just talking about football. Just give me a minute. I'm a season ticket holder to a team that doesn't do very well. But I go every weekend, rain, snow, you name it. So actually, I can join in if you just asked. And then I'm happy to have banter about my team's rubbish, because it's quite generic and it's probably factual. But it's about asking those questions to create that culture of feeling included.
Yeah, it's just kind of preconceived ideas that you wouldn't be able to participate in that conversation. I just want to pick up on Vicky's point about banter, and I'm interested to know from panelists of an experience that they'd be willing to share on where they've challenged banter that has made them feel uncomfortable, as a way to kind of sharing some tactics or actions that people could take themselves if they find themselves in a similar situation. Perhaps I could come to Sharon. Any thoughts from you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm from Yorkshire, so I'm quite direct in my responses. So, I've often come across people that have just said, that whole, it's so gay. And my immediate response is it really? Is it really going to make you sleep with a man? No, move on. And then it's kind of addressed it, it's moved on, and it's just shut them up. Because often, they just don't think about what they're saying. It's in their language, probably from school, because that's, especially when we were growing up and Section 28 was in place, it's so gay was used, all the time. And then it's just gone into the workplace. So now it's just actually about pointing out to people that that's not acceptable anymore. And then moving on. And often people go, oh, actually, I didn't think about what I was saying there. And some people do it deliberately, but a lot of people, it's just a throwaway comment. So it's just calling it out and making sure that people realize it's not acceptable anymore.
Yeah. Peter, any experiences you're willing to share?
Yeah, actually, it's more of a case of a chance when I didn't take a chance to challenge something because I wasn't out, I wasn't bringing myself to work. And yeah, there were derogatory comments about mental health, which I didn't feel was appropriate. It was a white, male, pale, stale environment. I did challenge it with my manager afterwards, but not at the time. And I just think that it is necessary. It's not just about, we're also talking about LGBT particularly, but there's neurodiversity there, there's racism, ageism, all these things. Any of those comments that are made, they're really going to just make people feel that it is not an inclusive environment. So it has to cover the whole gamut of banter to make sure, and unconscious bias as well, that make sure that people are being inclusive and not making comments which could be offensive to others.
Thank you, Peter. Interesting area, which I just wanted to explore with the panel on kind of this concept of a culture that thinks it's got it right. So you get a level of tokenism. So you get these kind of strange portrayals of what they believe demonstrates that they're an inclusive community. Often I'll challenge my team on imagery that's used for certain things. Has anyone experienced anything like that and willing to share views? Wojciech, perhaps I could come to you.
Well, in general, similar to you, I'm coming from the generation where we are very diverse as you know, as my generation of emerging leaders, and I always challenge that, especially when there's a presentation and somebody is putting a picture of you know, 5 white middle-aged male. So I was like, you know, first of all, you know, I'm always saying like, oh, where are the women? And it's that same where if I join a team, I'm always asking the question, okay, what about the diversity of the team? Like, are they all men, white, English? It's like, I don't want to work in an environment like this. So I think that's the reason why, like, as an emerging leader, we should challenge that. And yeah, so that's my answer.
Thanks, Wojciech. Angela, any thoughts from you in terms of how some companies portray that they are inclusive?
I think sometimes as well, a decision can be taken that is an assumption. I think we've mentioned on the call some assumptions that are made, and sometimes companies can assume that they're speaking on behalf of all communities. I think the challenge is as time progresses, community changes. We talk about language and wording that changes constantly, and I do think it can be a little bit difficult to stay on top of it. I think as a company, and also even as an individual, we've talked about sort of hello gents. I do tend to say hi guys, and it's just something I've got to reprogram myself not to use. And I think it's just really making sure that policies or networks or support are, you know, constantly just reevaluated. It's not we've done this exercise and we're complete, and we've got everything in place. It's constant just reassessment, checking, engaging, reaching out to our colleagues in the industry, and using all the social links and channels from charities and networks where we can tap in and just make sure that we stay supportive and do all we can to ensure that our teams feel like they are included, and it's not someone's excluded deliberately. It's just maybe that particular group may not have been fully thought of or considered. So it's just really making sure that we constantly keep updating.
Thank you, Angela. You raised the point there about language and terminology, which is a theme that I'd like to come on to now. I mean, I get very confused, you know, LGBTQ plus changing all the time. People can put a preference for which pronouns, as we did earlier on in the discussion today, that they'd like people to use when referring to them. You know, we work in a very eclectic environment, you could say, people from various, you know, different generations, different backgrounds. You know, is it any wonder that people get confused and accidentally put their foot in it, or, you know, prefer just not to go there because it's too difficult to work out? Keen to get some views from panelists. Peter, perhaps we could start with you.
Yeah, I think this is something that we can do more on, and certainly Vicky and I were talking about this the other day about building equality. We were doing the toolbox talks, which are available on the website that I plugged there. But there are opportunities there to for us to create some more material for people to help them with inclusive language. I mean, he, she. Just use they. I mean, I know they has become such a loaded term, but you can just use they. It's much easier to say they than rather than he, she, and it's a word and language which has been used for decades, centuries, but it's become so political now. But I think that there is opportunity for us to sort of share some information and posters or other ways of sharing that, just to say to people, you know, don't be afraid. People won't. People will be pleased that you've actually asked the question rather than be upset at you. You talked about LGBTQ. I mean, some people don't like queer. Some people do like queer. but they won't be too offended if you say that, and if they are, then they'll just gently ask you to use a different word, but that they will appreciate that you actually are trying. Certainly that's my experience.
I mean that the term queer is a very interesting one, and it's been through kind of various shades of meaning over the years for the community, to a point where the community actually, some people in the community use it as a understood kind of way of describing themselves. But who can use it? Because there are also people that say, well, I couldn't possibly refer to somebody as queer if I'm not queer myself.
I think with queer, because it is such a loaded term, then I think it's better to take the cue from others. I think there's a certain generation for whom queer is an offensive term, and they want to jettison it as soon as they can. But for others, it describes who they are. So I think it's probably one to maybe not use yourself unless they use it unless the person uses it for themselves. But it is certainly being reclaimed by a fair proportion of our community. But I think, it's probably a word to be used with caution, because some people do find it still offensive, and for good reason, because it was used as an insult for so long.
Yeah. Wojciech, at Ramboll, how are you helping colleagues understand all of these terms and phrases that we would like people to be able to use confidently?
So I'm happy to share some good practice from Ramboll's Global Pride Month campaign, which came out in June. And I think it was brilliant. It was just a piece of advice for all the employees to how to use more inclusive language. And I think, like, I always call this is like a low effort but huge impact initiative, with and every employer could do something like this in their own workplaces. And what I really like about this, it was just a couple of bullet points with an advice how to use more inclusive language, with examples like, say, partner instead of husband or wife, or like, be mindful that some people may prefer gender neutral pronouns such as they, them, they. But what I really liked in this piece of advice was that focus on a person and focus on a person first, rather than the demographics groups they belong. So only refer to individuals' gender, sexual orientation, age, or cultural background if it's relevant. And also, like, there was a piece of advice on, yes, be mindful that we work around people who might have diverse relationships and families, and adjust your language and to use more gender inclusive vocabulary.
Thank you, Wojciech. I mean, Vicky, I think your organisation often leads the way in language and vocabulary. Have you got any kind of tips or thoughts that you could share?
Thank you. We will take that as a compliment. I think everyone is on a journey, and we've all been learning about this. I think one of the things, just to pick up on what some of the others have been saying, is this is personal. This is someone's identity. And I think you have to treat people as individuals. We can do that not just by asking them about themselves, but telling them about ourselves and inviting that conversation, not expecting or probing. So, if you were to meet a Stephen or a Victoria, you might ask, are you a Steve or a Stephen? Are you a Vicky or a Victoria? What do you like? And that question comes naturally to us, but we don't ask about, what are your pronouns, because it feels a bit pointed and it puts somebody on the spot. But it's really easy to introduce yourself and say, you know, I'm Vicky and I use she or they pronouns. To me, they pronouns indicate all human beings. So that's why I'm happy to use them. You know, I'm a cisgendered woman, but I think they is an acceptable pronoun for anybody. It's also grammatically more correct when you're putting it in policies or documents. You know, instead of putting he/she everywhere, you can just put they and it becomes a lot more simple. One of the things that we have been doing is just light touches. So where we have our instructions on how to put your email signature together when somebody joins, we've got some notes in there to say, after your name, you may wish to add your memberships or qualifications. You might want to add your pronouns. It invites people to share that if they're willing to. We also link to some articles about why sharing pronouns is important and giving people that piece of education. I also found out that Vicky is regularly a man's name in India. So actually it's helped me not just from a gender identity perspective, but actually to say to people, I'm not a man, but thanks. And it stopped my emails that I used to receive saying Mr. Vicky overnight. It just went away. So actually it helps us with cultural connections as well as other identities. You know, and it's not just about the LGBTQ community, it's about everybody. It makes things a lot clearer for people to be able to be themselves and to be able to be respected.
Thank you, Vicky. Come to Claire. You know, what are your thoughts on some of the pitfalls of language and terminology, and what have you done in your experience to try and avoid them?
Yeah. So I am from that era that finds certain words difficult. Vicky and I have had that conversation. So we all do make mistakes, and I think that is the biggest thing that we need to accept, because we are all human as well, regardless of what community we are in. So it's about where the mistake comes from and how and why it's how. If it's because you genuinely trying to engage and you got something wrong, then as we've said already, the other person is still going to be grateful that you've tried. It's like going on holiday and trying to order in another language. It's showing that you care and that you want to make an effort. And I think if it's done in the right way. So I believe that all of us, and it's not just managers, it's all of us in the business, we encourage each other to you know, explore other opportunities, grow our mindsets and be interested in our colleagues. I'm never going to be interested in some of the things that people are doing, but I'm interested in that person, and I think that's the difference. So I encourage people to chat at lunchtimes. We're not all in the office now, but you know, pick up the phone, have coffees virtually and chat, just generally get that conversation going, because when you find out that they have a child or a wife or a husband or partner, you then start having a bit of a connection, and it brings the person to life and you feel that genuine connection. So that's what I would encourage as an individual. That way you then start to understand a sense of language and what works for you both, and that appreciation. Then I think there's the business side, and one of the things that I bang the drum on all of the time is that stop using words like we've got this problem. Yeah, the group of people on this call today are not a problem. You know, we have a situation to sort out. Well, it's not a situation. You know, this is a thing that is happening. It's been around for years. Whatever community you're talking about, it's always there. So let's be careful as a business that we're not going into, right, it's June, it's Pride Month. Oh gosh, we've got a problem because we've not got a flag. No, let's take away these negative words when we're talking about solutions. And then finally, it's not a HR metric. That is the biggest thing I would love business leaders to take from me on this call today, is that it's not a HR metric. We are not measuring how many of a type of person we have in an organization. We need to change it for it to be a business characteristic. Let's measure our business characteristic. That will then inform whether we are more inclusive. It will then also allow us to hone in on where maybe we could be even more inclusive. So yeah, it's not down to HR, it's not down to one person, it's all of us as a collective in the business. There's some of the pieces of advice I'd give to the leaders today on this call.
Great, thank you very much, Claire. Angela, if there was a recommendation that you would like businesses to take forward, what would it be?
I think it would be to start the conversation, be open, and I think lead by example. So people to speak openly about volunteering, getting involved, sharing links, sharing channels, so people understand more, and also engaging with other members of the industry. This course brilliant because we've got practical examples where we can actually go in and from straight away be able to make changes and to positively move forward in the direction of how we support our colleagues and the industry from losing talent. So just being really, really open and honest and truly being allies to all our colleagues, I think it's really important.
Thank you very much, Angela. I've come to Sharon. If there was one piece of advice you would like to see businesses taking forward in our sector, what would it be?
One's tricky. I
You
think
can have multiple because I didn't introduce you properly. So go on, you can have many more.
The key thing for me is it's got to be part of your strategy, your business strategy. It can't just be this tag along thing that you get somebody who's LGBT to just, you know, do something every Pride Month. There's got to be that understanding around the business imperative of it. And if you have got LGBT networks, make sure that you're properly supporting them, you know, giving them recognition, giving them time to do it, because otherwise your LGBT colleagues will end up with burnout because they're doing it on top of the day job. It's all kind of got to be that integrated piece and not just a standalone initiative. And when you start to resource it properly, like you would health and safety, like you would environmental issues, then you'll start to see proper changes around it. So just make sure kind of it is seen as part of your overall business strategy.
Thank you, Sharon. Wojciech, perhaps you could answer the same question on perhaps two levels, one from kind of the Ramboll side and one from the Emerging Professionals Network.
So I completely agree with what Sharon has just said, that, you know, ED&I values should be modeled and celebrated and included in the business strategy going forward. And within Ramboll, we've got this element in our strategy, which is great. But also a piece of advice that, you know, it's all about like listening and learning. And I think that this is what businesses should look into more, and they should promote more inclusive language. If in your organization there is no employee network groups, just create one or provide this environment for your employees to get together and create this safe space, because, you know, as I'm always saying, two heads is better than one, and then it will just grow and raise awareness within your organization. And also a message to business leaders, like, become an ally. It is hard at the beginning, but with practice, with learning about the challenges and good practice, you can really become a role model, and you can help our community to feel more inclusive.
Thank you very much, Wojciech. Peter, same question to you.
Sorry, I was finding the unmute button. I think one thing that we think, certainly in building equality, is that while some of the larger companies have the larger networks and the LGBT networks, you have the smaller offices and the small contractors or small consultancies, even small, who have no access to this. And the pandemic has changed how building equality is probably looking forward to how things work in the future. And we're looking at whether we can mimic the hybrid way of working. And people can't get into city centres for social events. How can we support people more broadly across wherever they may be, in nationally, internationally? Because there is so much isolation out there that we do need to consider how we support people better. And it should not be based on the fact that their employer has an LGBT network or has inclusive policies, that support needs to be elsewhere. And if we're going to make the industry more inclusive, we just need to make that quite clear that there is that support out there. And I don't think we have that yet.
Thank you, Peter. I think at an industry level, there's absolutely lots of work for ACE to do to help perhaps provide that kind of hub of access for the sector. Vicky, coming on to you. Same question.
I feel like this is a short straw and everyone's had all the good stuff. I think for me, if a company or organization is coming into May and starting to think, oh, we need to do something for Pride, that's when you're doing it wrong. It's not once a year, let's wave a flag kind of deal. Like, you know, we've done a flag in June. That's our commitment to LGBTQ people for the year. I think in order to be authentic, companies and organizations need to be doing this on a regular basis. You need to be ensuring that your policies don't make people who are LGBTQ feel awkward or like they're the problem people because they approach you about parental leave and it's not really in your policy. And how do we traverse this? Making sure that, you know, in meetings and in social events at work, people don't feel excluded. You don't have a, you know, 5% of people just feel like they shouldn't be there. And doing that all year round can be hard, but there are really good networks to support. And I'm really pleased to see the ACE stepping up and doing events like this and starting to form that support network. Building Equality are here too. So by all means, if anybody wants to reach out to Peter or me, and I think the one message that's come through from quite a few people today is listen to people, listen to your employees, listen to your colleagues, listen to your members and understand what they need and just do the work to provide it. Great.
Thank you for those thoughts, Vicky. I think we're almost out of time. I've not seen any questions come into the chat, but as I said, you know, we're happy to take questions afterwards. If anyone wants to email or anything like that, then absolutely we'll send that back out to the panelists and get a response. Thank you for listening. Same sentiments as Vicky. I've certainly found this discussion really interesting. I think it's a massive topic, but I think we've shared some quite simple tips that I think are very actionable. So, you know, I hope people have found it useful and can take these tools and ideas back into their own working environment. I'd like to thank the panel for their contribution to the discussion today. Sharon, Vicky, Peter, Angela, Wojciech and Claire, thank you very much. Just a reminder, we've recorded this roundtable. We will send the link out shortly so that you can share it with colleagues, cascade it through your organisation as you see fit. There's also an HR helpline which is available for additional specific support for members, which I hope you will also avail of should you wish. And we're about to launch our Inclusivity Pledge, which again, we will welcome contribution from our members on as we develop that. I said that this was one of a number of roundtables that we're organising. So if I can, just to plug for a couple of dates for your diary, our next roundtable is on neurodiversity. That's on the 7th of September. And then we've got an interesting one on overcoming barriers for ethnic minorities on the 6th of October. I think we need to revisit this topic again and again, and we'll certainly get planning on how we do that and what angle we take. So I don't think I have anything more to say, but thank you very much, all of you, for your participation, and have a good afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.